Hello? Hello, chat. Happy New Year, everybody. It honestly doesn't feel that much different. I get more, freaked out about the fact that, 2016 was 7 years ago now. Than the fact that it's 2023, if that makes any sense. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Yeah, how was your New Year's? For me, a friend... Oh. Oh, yeah. For me, an IRL came over and, we spent New Year's together. That was fun. I go back up to college in 4 days, so I'm probably gonna stream at least once more before then, but, with my job schedule, I don't know my job schedule yet, because I don't work till the 16th, but, I don't know how frequent I'm gonna be able to stream, because last semester I didn't stream as much in comparison to how much I used to. So, I don't know what's gonna happen. I just watched TV, then went to sleep. Pretty underwhelming. That's fair. Yeah. So today we're gonna be reading chapter 26 of, The Stars and Their Children. When we last left off, Wilbur, Quackity, and Jack were gonna head to probably Tommy's room or to the main hangar to escape. Well, for Wilbur and Tommy to escape. We'll see. We'll see what happens, because I'm fucking scared. Anyway, if you enjoy this content, be sure to leave a follow, because, big number go up, make brain happy. Yes. Alright. Boop. There we go. The Stars and Their Children, I'll say this every time because she deserves all the credit in the world for this amazing thing. Is written by Bones and the Bees. Very talented writer. I wish I could write as well as she can. I probably could if I put in time, but I don't have time. Alright. This one is pretty insane, so brace yourselves because shit is gonna go down. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh dear. Oh no. Chapter 26. Also, 1 second. I might have to take a few more a couple more frequent drink breaks because right before this I had a really intense to get to the other side game. One person kept knocking me off twice. It felt like they were targeting me. Anyway. Sincerely, my beloved, so true. Chapter 26. Echoing in His Bones. Summary. The plan is set into motion. As soon as the door slid shut behind them, the cold threaded itself under Wilbur's coat, chilling him to his core. The smile disappeared from his face as fear consumed him once more. Jack's shoulder brushed against his own. Wilbur took a breath to try and steady himself, but it only brought more burning salt with it. One step at a time. The shuttle had been secured. Now, he needed Tommy. Wilbur turned down the hall towards Tommy's room, Jack hurrying to keep up with him. They only made it down a few doors, though, before he jolted to a stop and felt Jack bump against his back. Will, what the... Wilbur? Amesley's voice echoed down the hallway, their dark eyes pinning Wilbur where he stood. Fuck. Why did it have to be Amesy of all people he ran into this late at night? Hey Amesy, he called out, giving them an awkward wave. The two stared at each other for a few moments. Amesy was dressed in pajamas, knit caps still pulled low over their head and flowers pressed tight against their cheeks as if they were trying to shield themselves from the cool night air. Wilbur was still wearing the clothes he'd put on this morning, but Amesy's eyes fell right onto the bag Quackity had given him. Fuck. What are you doing? Amesy asked, taking a step towards him. I was just visiting Quackity, Wilbur stammered, figuring a half-truth would come across better than an outright lie. Another step closer. This late at night? We were sharing a nightcap. And the bag? They pushed, now standing right in front of him. A gift he gave me. Wilbur shrugged. Amesy considered this for a moment. Their eyes scanned him up and down, and he had to resist the urge to shrink under their gaze. But it was then he noticed something about them, and realized this was his first time actually seeing Amesy face to face since before his fight with Tommy. It would be kind to say they looked tired. Their eyes were bloodshot, with dark bags sitting underneath them. The flowers on their cheeks were drooping, while the ones in their hair almost looked as though they were wilting. When his eyes fell to their hands, he noticed their nails had been bit down, and there was a bit of blood on their thumb from where they'd been picking at a hangnail. Wait, are you okay? Wilbur asked without thinking. Amesy blinked, seemingly confused that Wilbur was asking about them when he was the one in a compromising position. I'm fine, they quickly said. But what? Okay, that's a bold-faced lie and we both know it. Wilbur cut them off, adjusting the bag on his shoulder. You look like shit, Amesy. That's a bit rude. Amesy shot back, scowling now. Wilbur blinked. Amesy, come on. Amesy's scowl deepened. Fine. If you want to know, I'm still not being listened to by the other ambassadors and the stress is keeping me up at night. So I'm pretty goddamn exhausted, they explained, folding their arms over their chest. Now, since I answered your question, you owe me an explanation for what you're doing here. And for what you're doing here. I just told you I was visiting. Bullshit! Amesy exclaimed. I'm not an idiot, Wilbur. Wait, hold on. That's not the accent. I'm not an idiot, Wilbur. You're out here in the dead of night, carrying a giant bag and walking right in the direction of Tommy's room, looking like you're scared out of your mind. Something's going on. Wilbur winced. Just because Amesy was a kind, good-hearted person, that didn't make them a fool. He was well aware of that. Wait. Amesy was good. They'd always been inherently good. Like Jack, they never pushed Wilbur for information, but they wanted to make sure he was okay. Unlike Jack, though, they hadn't been born an Antarctic Empire citizen. Flosslium was taken over by the Empire. Hi, Chrissy. Or Venti, sorry, that just... where was I? Also, by the way, I do accents for the people. It might not be the best, but it helps with my immersion. Anyway. Sorry, I was looking at something. Floslium was taken over by the Empire. The same fate Eldenvegger was going to meet if he and Tommy didn't get off Zephyr's 4 as soon as possible. Right now, Wilbur didn't have time to try and parse where Amesy's loyalties were. But at one point in time, Amesy had been Wilbur's friend. Look, Amesy, I can't tell you what's going on, Wilbur said, looking down to meet their eyes. I know the last time we saw each other was a bit of a shitfest, and I know I got way out of line with some of the things I said. But if you're ever my friend, I need you to do me a favor right now. The exhaustion in Amesy's eyes faded as they leaned in closer. Well, what are you talking about? Wilbur bent down so he was level with Amesy's ear and whispered, Just go to your room and don't tell anyone you saw me out here until the morning. What? I have somewhere I need to be, Wilbur said as he straightened back up, brushing past Amesy to hurry down the hall. Just please do that for me. I don't... What? Ignoring Amesy's question, Wilbur continued towards Tommy's room, Jack hurrying close behind. He listened for the sound of Amesy's footsteps following him and Jack, but quickly realized they weren't there. He waited a bit longer, continued listening for a third set of shoes against the stone. Nothing. Amesy wasn't following them. All Wilbur could do right now was hope that Amesy did what he asked and kept quiet until the morning. He was fairly certain they would, because they would probably assume they could ask him what he was doing tomorrow. Hopefully they wouldn't blame themselves when they learned about his and Tommy's escape. A few more doors and they reached Tommy's room, the one that Wilbur had shared with him for the majority of their time on Zephyr's 4. Deja vu flooded over him at the sight of the door again. He hadn't been down this hallway since the day Tommy called him a bastard. He'd been too scared of running into his little brother to venture to this part of the castle, terrified of a confrontation they still haven't properly had. At least the fear racing through him right now wasn't because of Tommy. Going right up to the door, Wilbur tried the lock, jumping when it worked immediately. He would have thought that Tommy had changed after their fight, but apparently that wasn't the case. The door hissed open, and he heard a yelp from inside. What the... Wilbur poked his head in, and Tommy, who was sitting on the bed fully dressed, breathed a sigh of relief. What the fuck, Wilbur? Wincing at how loud he was, Wilbur grabbed Jack's shoulder and dragged him inside the room. Only when the door slid shut behind them did he finally speak. You're gonna wake up the whole fucking palace with all your shouting? Tommy scowled, but Wilbur could tell there was no true heat behind it. I wouldn't have shouted if you didn't scare the shit out of me. Have you heard of knocking? I thought... Okay, you know what? Never mind. Wilbur huffed, shaking his head. Anyway, Tommy, are you ready to go? Tommy opened his mouth to reply, but froze when he noticed Jack standing behind Wilbur. Wait, so you told him and he's... Yes, he knows what's going on, Wilbur explained, adjusting the bag on his shoulder again. Did you get the stuff I told you to? Perking up, Tommy hopped off the bed and ran to the couch, where a large tote bag similar to the one Wilbur had on his shoulder was sitting. Yup, my natural charm still works on cooks, even on different planets, he bragged, flashing Wilbur a cheeky smirk. I just told them I had really bad insomnia and didn't want to have to wake them up for any food in the middle of the night, and they gave me a shit ton of snacks to keep up here. Also, I threw the clothes they gave us in the bag too. If we need to hide out on an outer sector planet, I figured we could barter with them. Thank fuck. Although he had faith in Tommy, it was a relief to know that his part of the plan had gone off without a hitch. That's great. Quackity also gave us some supplies, along with some emergency money, Wilbur told him, showing off his own bag. Our shuttle is waiting for us in the hangar. I had Quackity look over it, and he said it's fully functional and ready to go. Tommy took a shaky breath, nodding and glancing around the room as he slung his bag over his shoulder. Shit. So that's it, huh? We've done everything. Wilbur nodded, shoving down the nerves rising up his throat and dragging a hand through his hair. Yup, we've done everything we need to. Silence fell between them. The brothers shared a look, and Wilbur once again found himself wondering if this was the right choice. If this failed, they'd lose every advantage they had with Phil and Techno, and any say they had in the negotiations would crumble to dust. The relationships they'd built with the Emperor and the Imperator would be ruined. Not to mention, Jack and Quackity would probably both be arrested for helping them. And if this succeeded, then they'd have to keep themselves from being hunted down by Sempi. Wilbur kept saying he'd work something out, but the truth of it was, Wilbur didn't have the slightest clue how he was going to keep Dream from finding them. Tommy. No. Tommy snapped, cutting him off. I know what you're gonna say, Wilbur, but we're not backing down now. Shit. Curse Tommy for being able to read him so well. Are you sure? Wilbur asked, dropping his voice. Because I keep thinking about everything that could go wrong, and I don't know if it's worth it. Tommy considered Wilbur's words for a moment, nodding to himself before looking up to meet Wilbur's eyes again. No matter what happens, we're in this together, right? Sucking in a breath, Wilbur nodded. We are. And we'll figure it out as we go, Tommy said, with the kind of confidence Wilbur wished he had. Let's hurry the fuck up and get out of here. Before Wilbur could say anything else, Tommy was opening the door to the room and hurrying out into the hallway, leaving Jack and Wilbur rushing to keep up. The trio's footsteps echoed off the stone walls in time with the sound of their bags slamming against their sides. Jack moved to the front while Tommy stayed in between him and Wilbur, and once again, Wilbur found himself being taken back to the night of the invasion. Every time they stopped at a corner, Jack holding up a hand so he could look around the wall to see if the coast was clear, Wilbur remembered when he'd been on the lookout for Sempi soldiers in his own home. His shoulders were tense, and he could barely hear himself think with how loud the blood rushing in his ears was. When they ducked into a shadowy alcove to hide from a few servants, Wilbur noticed Tommy's freckles glowing in the dim light, and forgot how to breathe as his mind flashed with the mental image of Tommy crouched behind him in the crawl space. By the time they got to the train platform, Wilbur was ready to fall apart because of his nerves. His hands trembled violently, his fingers gripping the strap of the bag Quackity had given him tight enough to turn the knuckles white. His breathing was stuttered, and there was a push and pull sensation hitting against his chest. The waves moving in and out, but not in a constant way he could count. No, these waves were random, slamming into him every few seconds without warning, in a pattern he couldn't even hope to decipher. Thankfully, the train platform was empty at this time of night. Jack led them to a single train car sitting still on the rails, and Wilbur remembered when Phil had taken him to that ice cave so many months ago. It was one of the first times Phil had done something for Wilbur that didn't seem to be a clear power move. There was no threat that came with him showing Wilbur the stars trapped in the ice above their heads. No insults or ominous words. Phil had called it a field trip. I had a feeling you'd like it, little bird. Wilbur's eyes burnt at the memory. Isn't there supposed to be a god here? He asked instead, remembering how a guard had driven the train to the ice cave for him and Phil. "There is," Jack said, pressing a few buttons on the control panel. "It's me." Tommy frowned. "What?" "The guy whose shift it wasn't feeling great, so I told him I'd cover for him," Jack explained, not looking at either of them. "Honestly, in retrospect, that's kind of fucking stupid. I'm gonna be placed here, so they'll know I would have had to have seen you two when you left, meaning it won't be hard to figure out I helped you." Although he was hiding his nerves well, Wilbur could see that his own hands were shaking as the train doors opened up behind him. There was going to be consequences for what Jack was doing. Wilbur knew that. But he thought he'd be able to lie and say he didn't know anything. This, though... Wilbur's thought was cut off by a new voice. "Tommy?" Jumping like he'd been shocked, Tommy whipped around, face twisting into a scowl when he locked eyes with the person at the other end of the platform. "Rambu?" he hissed. "What you doing here?" Wilbur's heart skipped a beat in his chest as he looked over his shoulder and saw Rambu making his way towards the two of them. Like always, his shoulders were hunched, and he was twisting his dual-toned hands in front of him. His eyes darted around nervously, and Wilbur noticed how he seemed to be avoiding Tommy's gaze. Me?" Rambu asked, pointing to himself. "Oh, thanks, Nakia." Delicious. Where was I? Me?" Rambu asked, pointing to himself. "I was just going back to my room when I heard voices, but what are you doing here?" His brows were furrowed, the confusion on his face only growing when he glanced at Wilbur. "And why is Orpheus here?" Behind them, Jack had frozen in place. Wilbur felt rooted to the ground, unable to take a step forward even if he wanted. Fucking Rambu. A suffocating silence hung over the platform. Tommy clenched his jaw, eyes flickering between Wilbur and Rambu like he was silently begging for Wilbur to tell him what to say. But Wilbur, he was at a loss. With Ainsley, he had just been walking down the hallway at night. Sure, the bag made him a bit suspicious, but an escape wasn't going to be the first conclusion they jumped to. But now they were on the train platform that led out of the palace. The train was already activated and ready to go. Both he and Tommy had heavy bags over their shoulders and were fully dressed despite how late it was. There was no excuse they could come up with to explain this, and everyone in the room knew it. Wilbur could practically see the moment the words "fuck it" crossed through Tommy's head. "We're leaving, Rambu," Tommy snapped, taking a step towards him. "Me and Will are getting off this horrible fucking planet and going somewhere else." Rambu's eyes widened. "What? You can't. No, you... Why? You're safe here. Why would you leave?" "Safe?" A bitter laugh echoed through the train platform, scraping out of Tommy's throat in a way that seemed borderline painful. Wilbur and Rambu both winced at the sound. "We're not fucking safe here, Rambu! Safety is bullshit when you're surrounded by a bunch of liars." "Liars?" Rambu squeaked out, stumbling back when Tommy shoved his finger into his chest. "What do you mean?" Suddenly, Tommy grabbed the front of Rambu's shirt, yanking him down so they were eye to eye. "Drop the fucking act," Tommy hissed, his eyes alight with icy flames. "You know exactly what I'm talking about." Rambu tried to pull away, but Tommy refused to let go. "No, I don't! We heard you!" Tommy shouted, letting go of the shirt to shove Rambu against the wall. "Me and Will heard you talking to Techno." For a brief second, Rambu's eyes widened. Then he froze and started shaking his head as he tried to get out of Tommy's grip. Tommy, please, I don't know what you're talking about. Rambu. Wilbur cut in, making his and Tommy's head snap to him. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Tommy was easy. You told me to befriend him when he got here and it was fine. I can do it, I promise. Oh wait, no, accent, hold on. Tommy was easy. You told me to befriend him when he got here and it was fine. I can do it, I promise. He lilted his voice to mock Rambu's accent, and a sliver of satisfaction curled through him when he saw the Andirian shrink back against the wall. We heard you, Tommy repeated, no longer shouting as he pressed against Rambu's shoulders. You've been spying on us the whole time. Spying on me. Rambu's chest rapidly rose and fell, his mismatched eyes snapping around the room like he was trying to find some means of escape. But Tommy was stronger than him, and he wasn't loosening his grip anytime soon. A few beats passed. Then, he let out a breath and stopped fighting. Fine, he admitted, eyes falling to the ground. You're right. I've been giving Techno and Phil reports on you two for a while now. A beat passed. Wilbur waited for Rambu to say more, but he was silent. That's it? Tommy asked before Wilbur could. That's all you fucking have to say for yourself? I don't know what you want me to say, Rambu exclaimed, lifting his head again. I don't know. How about I know it was wrong, or an I wish I hadn't done it, or maybe even just a fucking I'm sorry. Did you ever think of that? Tommy yelled, slamming his free hand on the wall next to Rambu's head. Rambu flinched at the sound. I'm sorry? I don't know why you're so upset. I was mostly just telling Techno stuff you'd already told him yourself. Fear momentarily forgotten, Wilbur clenched his jaw as the burning in his lungs faded away. He took a step closer to Rambu, while Tommy dropped the arms holding him to the wall. Rambu stumbled forward, nearly falling flat on his face before catching his footing at the last second. Neither Wilbur or Tommy moved to help him. Did you just say you don't know why I'm upset? Tommy asked, his voice having dropped to a low whisper. I did, Rambu said, straightening up and taking a step back from both the brothers, although he was stuck between them and the wall. Tommy blinked. Our entire friendship was a lie. You don't get why I'd be upset about that. What? It wasn't a lie, Rambu said, shaking his head. Yeah, sure, Techno told me to become friends with you two so I could tell him things you might not want to say to him or Phil, but I did it because I was trying to help you. Before either Tommy or Wilbur could figure out how the fuck to respond to something as stupid as that, another new voice cut in. You what? Wilbur cursed under his breath at the sound of Amesy's voice. He squeezed his eyes shut as a new pair of footsteps ran onto the platform, only opening them when Amesy had appeared from the shadows a few feet away from the brothers and Rambu. Amesy, what the fuck are you doing here? Tommy asked. At the same time, Wilbur exclaimed, I told you to stay out of it! Tommy snapped his head towards Wilbur. You knew they were here? I ran into them on our way to your room and I panicked. Wilbur shot back. Why the fuck didn't you tell me? I thought I handled it. Well, clearly you fucking didn't because— Enough! Amesy's shout silenced the brothers. They both looked back at the flora, and Wilbur was almost relieved to see that they were more focused on Rambu than either of them. I don't know what you guys are all doing here, but I also don't really care right now. They took a step towards Rambu, and he pressed himself as far back against the wall as he could. Rambo? Did I hear you correctly when you said you've been reporting everything Will and Tommy say to Technoblade? Their voice was low. There was a tightness in their shoulders Wilbur had never seen before. It was so unfamiliar to see them so wound up that it took him a few moments to even recognize the thing radiating off of them as anger. Amos wasn't just upset. They were furious. You heard correctly, Rambo stammered out, but I was just trying to help. How the fuck was how the fuck was lying to us and reporting everything we said to Phil and Techno supposed to help us? Wilbur snapped, barely concealed rage sitting under his words. It was gonna make the negotiations easier, Rambo defended, holding his arms closer to his chest. Yeah, easier for Techno and Phil, Tommy exclaimed. No, that wasn't... Rambo took a stuttered breath, squeezing his eyes shut as he shook his head. I was helping, I swear. I can't believe this. Amesy cut in, all their flowers facing him. I defended you over and over again. I told Wilbur he was being unfair for not trusting you. I told Tommy you were just socially awkward when he kept asking me why you were so nosy. I thought you genuinely wanted to be friends with them, so I did everything I could to help you. They sucked in a sharp breath. Was our friendship real, Rambo? Rambo flinched. What? Of course it was. How am I supposed to believe you? Amesy snapped. I'm part of the diplomatic team for Floslium. How do I know you didn't just befriend me to get insider information on us? I didn't. Oh fuck, I told you so much stuff about our discussions, Amy muttered, dragging their hands down their face. This whole time I thought I could trust you, but... Have you ever told the truth, Rambo? Wilbur jumped in, drawing all eyes back to him. Or are you just so afraid of people disliking you that you just do and say whatever they ask? For the first time since this conversation began, Rambo didn't have a response to that. His lower lip wobbled as he curled in on himself, shoving both hands in his pockets. Amesy had turned away from him and was pacing back and forth, pushing their hands through their hair like they were lost in thought. Tommy's shoulders were rigid, and despite how cold his voice was, Wilbur could see tears glittering in the corners of his eyes. Behind them all, Jack was still waiting at the control panel. He stood completely still, like the thought that if he didn't move, Amesy and Rambo wouldn't notice him. So far, it seemed to be working, given that neither of them had so much as glanced in his direction. Wilbur focused back on Rambo, his eyes being drawn to the hands he still had in his pockets. It was then Wilbur saw something glowing from inside the fabric. But right before he could open his mouth to say something, Rambo, stop! Tommy's voice echoed off the walls, reverberating through Wilbur's bones and chilling him to his core. Wait, hold on. Wait, glowing? A hollow pad. Is it one for recording? Oh, shit. The effect was instantaneous. Rambo froze in place, hand half in his pocket, eyes wide and lips still wobbling. 1 second passed, then another. Wilbur felt like he was going to throw up. Tommy, not right now, Wilbur, Tommy snapped, not tearing his eyes away from Rambo. We heard Techno tell you that you didn't have to spy anymore, but you begged him to let you continue. Why? Why did you do it? Why did you betray me, even when you knew I'd already been through this before? He paused, shutting his eyes and taking 2 deep breaths. Then, tell me the truth, Tommy commanded. Again, the effect was immediate. I wanted to prove myself, and I wanted to give Techno and Phil a reason to like me, Rambo admitted, eyes widening as the words slipped out on their own. A spineless people-pleaser through and through, Wilbur was annoyed at his own surprise. Did you feel bad about it at all? Tommy pushed. No, Rambo answered, looking horrified at his own mouth's betrayal. Suddenly, Amesy stepped forward again. Did you ever report anything I told you about Floslium and all the diplomats to Technoblade and Filza? Yes, but only once. Fear flashed over Amesy's face. What was it? Before Rambo could answer, though, the effects of Tommy's voice wore off. Stiffening, he threw himself back against the wall, breath coming in short, panicked gasps as he whipped his head around the room. You can use your voice, Rambo gasped, eyes finally settling on Tommy. You told me you couldn't. I lied, Tommy shot back. Rambo stared at Tommy for a moment, pure terror radiating off of him in waves. Then, he reached into his pocket again, pulling out a hollow pad with trembling hands. Tommy coughed, clearly struggling with his voice. Go to sleep! It was a far weaker command than the last 2 he'd said, but it did the trick. Rambo went limp, eyes fluttering shut as he dropped to the ground like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The hollow pad was knocked out of his hands, skidding across the floor where it landed right at Amesy's feet. Amesy and Wilbur locked eyes. He opened his mouth, but they immediately held their hands up. I'm not gonna touch it, they said, before kicking the hollow pad across the platform where no one could reach it. Wilbur frowned. Why not? Are you kidding? You think I trust anyone on this goddamn planet after that? They exclaimed, gesturing to Rambo's limp form. If you want to leave, then get out while you still can. I'm not gonna try and stop you. Tommy narrowed his eyes. What? He winced, his voice scratchy from what he'd just done. What are you gonna do then? Right now? I'm gonna stay here and wait for him to wake up because I need to know what the fuck he told Technoblade about the flora. He might have actually called guards here. Will you tell them what happened? Wilbur asked, stepping back towards the train. Well, Tommy, I know you don't trust me and I get why now, Amesy told them, kneeling down on the ground. You can knock me out if you want, but I'm not gonna tell them anything. I swear. Wilbur considered this. He considered the way their shoulders shook and their hands curled in and out of fists. He considered the pure betrayal in their voice when Rambo admitted everything. He considered how instead of being afraid when they realized he and Tommy could use their voices, they jumped right into asking Rambo questions. Amesy hadn't been in on anything. They were betrayed, just like him and Tommy. Get on the ground and pretend like you got knocked out, Wilbur said after a moment, reaching out to grab Tommy's shoulder so he could drag him towards the train. Tommy's voice is weak. Rambo won't be asleep for long. When he wakes up, you need to pretend like the same thing happened to you. Nodding, Amesy laid down on the ground next to Rambo. Got it. Anything else? If you can, try to hold them off from getting to the hangar. Distract them, act like you're panicking, anything you can think of to slow them down. He paused, now shoulder to shoulder with Jack as they all stood in front of the doors to the train. "Stay safe, Amesy. You too." Letting out an unsteady breath, Wilbur turned to Jack. "Can you have the train take us to the hangar?" Jack's jaw was clenched as he glanced between Amesy and the train. "I want to," he said, chewing the inside of his cheek. "But Will, I could get executed for this, you know? Like I said, they'll know I was on shift and I helped you." Wilbur considered this for a moment. Even if Amesy didn't say a word about what just transpired, the records were going to show that Jack was here no matter what. He was culpable. There was no getting around that. "Use your voice on him. That way he has an excuse." Suddenly, the waves crashing inside of Wilbur's head fell silent all at the same time, and he knew what he had to do. "Not unless I give you plausible deniability," Wilbur said, avoiding Jack's eyes. Jack frowned. "What do you—" "Take us to the hangar." Although it had been months since Wilbur had even tried to use his voice, it felt as natural as breathing to push the command into his words. He wasn't using his full power. No, Wilbur wasn't going to do that unless he had no other choice. But his voice echoed all the same, scraping in his throat and no doubt vibrating all the way into Jack's bones. Oil-slick guilt roiled in his stomach as Jack's eyes glazed over, and he turned to make his way onto the train. Tommy gave him a wide-eyed look, but Wilbur avoided his gaze, not wanting to see the judgment there for what he'd just done to their friend. As he stepped onto the train, cold fingers wrapped around his own. He hesitated, eyes burning again as his throat ached with the remnants of his ability. Tommy squeezed his fingers. Wilbur squeezed back. They stepped onto the train together. Jack was silent as he pressed the button to shut the doors, and Wilbur met Amesy's eyes through the glass. A single nod. An understanding they'd finally reached. And then, the train was off. The last time he and Tommy had ridden along this part of the track was when they'd just arrived on Zephyr's 4. Despite the terror both of them had been feeling, Tommy had pressed his face against the glass to see the city in all its splendor, with Wilbur doing the same. Neither of them looked out the glass at the city beyond. Even as it glittered under the blue and white light of the ice above it, Wilbur didn't want to see everything he was leaving behind. It hurt. Tommy's hand gripped his tight enough to make his fingers ache. From the corner of his eye, he noticed Tommy wince every time he swallowed. He could only imagine how badly his throat hurt after using his voice that much after so little practice. It was a miracle he had been able to pull off those commands in the first place. Like when they escaped from Eldingvegger, it was probably more to do with Tommy's emotions fueling it than anything else, but that could only get him so far. He tried to avoid looking at Jack as the train sped along the rail, not wanting to see that hollow stare he no doubt was wearing. It was for the best. He knew that. It was the only way he could escape punishment for helping them with all of this. That didn't make it okay, though. Wilbur knew that. Outside the glass, the world went dark as they entered the tunnel that led into the hangar. Tommy pressed closer to Wilbur's side, and Wilbur squeezed his fingers again. He wasn't going anywhere. The darkness disappeared as the terminal station came into view. There was a quiet hum as the train slowed to a stop, the doors sliding open to the empty platform. Wilbur and Tommy stood at the same time. Jack was blinking, coming back to himself. You escort us to the hangar and help our shuttle leave, Wilbur commanded before Jack could get another word out. Again, that glazed-over look returned to Jack's eyes, and he was silent as he stepped off the train. Wilbur gulped, but Tommy didn't let him falter. He dragged him along, the two hurrying off the train with Jack following right beside them. It was eerie how empty the terminal station was at this time of night. The only light came from emergency strips lining the floor, casting everything in shades of red. As they left the terminal station behind, Wilbur jumped at the strange shadows their figures cast along the patched metal walls, the iron grip of fear having returned tenfold the moment they'd left the palace behind. The last time Wilbur had been here, the place had been buzzing with life. Oh, sorry, needed to stretch real quick. People of all different species running about in blue fatigues, footsteps and conversations intermixing to create a kind of chaotic symphony. Now, the only sound came from their combined footsteps. Boots dinged against metal, and Wilbur shivered at how much colder it was over here compared to inside the palace. Beside him, Tommy picked up the pace, and Wilbur followed suit. Finally, after what couldn't have been more than a minute of walking but felt like hours, one second, sorry. There we go. The hangar itself came into view. The lights flickered on the moment they stepped foot inside, likely due to the presence of a motion detector. Immediately, Jack turned towards a large console set up against a wall. He began to press a few buttons, and Wilbur heard a mechanical whirring as the platform they'd entered the hangar through rose from the ground. A hole in the ceiling opened up for them to fly out of. When Wilbur looked back at the shuttles in the hangar, he almost cried with relief when he spotted an Eldingvegger crest engraved into white metal. Holy fuck, it's really there, Tommy breathed out. Wilbur laughed and nodded. It's there. We can leave. He and Tommy exchanged a look of pure relief. This was it. They were so close to being free. Glancing back at Jack, Wilbur's chest ached. His glazed eyes were focused on the console in front of him, and Wilbur knew that even if he tried to talk to him, he wouldn't be able to respond because of the command. He hoped that Jack would understand. You ready to go? Wilbur asked. Oh no. His sentence is cut off. I don't like this. You ready to go? Wilbur asked, forcing himself to focus back on Tommy. Tommy nodded. Yep, sure at. He was cut off by the sound of an engine. Not a shuttle engine. Something smaller, faster. Something coming down the tunnel they just entered the hangar from. Both their heads whipped to the hangar entrance, and fear shot through Wilbur like a knife to the chest. It was a motorized cart, no doubt used for transport of some kind, and it was heading full speed straight at them. Before Wilbur could even take a step towards their shuttle, the car was in the hangar, screeching to a stop. Someone kicked the door open, and a flash of pink hair told Wilbur exactly who was inside. Stop! Run! Wilbur shouted. He and Tommy turned to book it for the shuttle, holding on to each other for dear life. But they only got a few steps before Tommy shrieked. There was a mess of hands and feathers as someone tried to grab Wilbur, while someone else grabbed Tommy. Their hands were whipped apart as Wilbur tripped over his own feet, falling flat on the ground. Someone tried to wrap their arms around him. Wilbur screamed and elbowed them blindly, hearing a familiar voice grunt in pain when his arm met flesh. He could hear Tommy shouting curses behind him. Scrambling to his feet, he stumbled back towards the shuttle. His chest was heaving as he tried to make sense of what just happened. The shuttle was to his back. In front of him, 3 people stood. Techno had Tommy in a headlock, clearly not with the intention to hurt him, but tight enough to keep him from squirming out of his grip. That didn't mean Tommy wasn't trying, though. He was cursing up a storm as he clawed at Techno's arms, his bag forgotten on the ground by his feet. Then, besides the 2 of them, there was Phil. Phil, who Wilbur now realized was the person he'd elbowed. Phil, whose wings were tucked tightly against his back, although his feathers were more ruffled than he'd ever seen them. Phil, whose mouth was set in a grim line, eyes completely unreadable. Behind them, Wilbur could see Puffy holding Jack's arms behind his back. He wasn't fighting her, though, having gone limp in her arms like a doll. Orpheus, you don't want to do this, Techno warned, seemingly unfazed by the way Tommy was still scratching at his arm. Step away from the shuttle. No! Wilbur shouted, salt water burning every single organ in his body. Let go of him! You know we can't do that, mate, Phil said, his voice much lower than Techno's. Yes, you fucking can! You let us stay here for refuge, but now we're leaving, Wilbur shot back, fighting to take full breaths. Why, though? Techno asked, brows furrowing. Why do you want to leave all of a sudden? Because you're a fucking liar! Tommy shouted, still thrashing in Techno's grip. Techno frowned, while Phil raised an eyebrow. What's he talking about? Phil asked, looking at Wilbur. Wilbur gulped. We know about Rombu, and the assignment Techno gave him. He spat out, glaring at the 2 men in front of him. Immediately, Phil sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose, while Techno's frown deepened. Look, I get— We don't want to hear it! Wilbur shouted, cutting Techno off. You've been lying to our faces this whole goddamn time, telling us that you care, acting like you actually give a shit about what we want, but it was all a fucking game to you, wasn't it? He winced, stumbling further back against the shuttle. You were both manipulating us from the start. There was a heavy pause as Phil and Techno shared a look. It was only for a second, but something seized inside Wilbur's chest, seeing it. The waves battering him on all sides as he drowned over and over and over again. Just let us explain. No! Wilbur exclaimed, cutting Phil off this time. Let go of Tommy and let us leave the planet. Where are you gonna go, though? Techno asked, a crease forming between his brows. Like I'd fucking tell you. Wilbur shot back. Phil sighed. Orpheus, you don't understand. You don't understand. Wait. No, I got it right. If you leave the planet, you'll be in danger, I know. Wilbur finished for him with a scowl. But you want to know something, Phil? He sucked in another breath, wincing as the cold air burnt his throat. I'd rather take my chances with fucking a Sempi than stay here for one more second. Because at least Dream won't make me false promises before putting a knife to my throat. A long moment passed as Phil stared at him, something in his expression crumbling away. He opened his mouth again, but at that second, all Wilbur could hear in his mind was one word. Liar. 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 And just like that, the waves went silent again. "Let go of my brother!" The command ripped out of his throat with such violent force, it shook the walls of the hangar itself. He could practically see the words knock into techno, his arms falling immediately as Tommy sprinted to Wilbur. Before any of them could process what he'd just done, Wilbur then shouted, "Don't move!" Phil paused mid-step, while Techno's hand froze where he had been reaching out to grab Tommy. Behind them, Wilbur saw Jack shrug off Puffy's grip, practically falling on the console to continue the hangar opening process. Puffy stood still completely behind him. Tommy stumbled over to him, and Wilbur wrapped an arm around his little brother, pulling him into his side as a fire made itself known in his throat. "We're going to leave," Wilbur said, wincing at how hoarse his voice was after that, "whether you like it or not." Although he didn't want to, Wilbur found his eyes drawn to Phil. He wasn't sure what he was going to see written across his face, but braced himself for anger, maybe even fear. Instead, Phil was smiling. It was a kind of smile Wilbur had never seen on Phil's face before. There was no smugness to it, no mockery. This wasn't him gloating about having the upper hand. No, this was something different. Pride is what his smile screamed. Blinding pride. "You can use your voice," Phil murmured, something almost giddy lilting his words. "This whole time, you never gave that up." He let out a small laugh, but it was awkward given the fact that he couldn't move his head. "Well played, little bird. Well played." And despite everything, Wilbur couldn't help but think that the praise sounded completely genuine. He froze, staring at Phil as his throat threatened to close up on him. Tommy noticed this though and grabbed his hand, dragging him towards the shuttle. "Will, we gotta go. That won't last forever." Wilbur could only nod, his head feeling as though it was full of cotton as Tommy opened the door to the shuttle, guiding him inside. Right before the door shut, Wilbur and Phil locked eyes again, and Wilbur felt a single tear fall down his cheek. And then, they were inside the shuttle. The process of climbing into the cockpit and starting up the shuttle was all a haze for Wilbur. Everything inside of him was cold as he went through the familiar startup procedures, the shuttle humming to life under his hands. Slowly... Wait, hold on. Ads are running. Normally I wouldn't do this when I'm reading, but this feels like a big moment. So I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait. Let me know, Alright. So, how's the weather? Nobody can hear this. Nobody subbed. I'm just doing this just for the sake of the VOD. Do people even watch my VODs? I'm sure some people do. No, jeez, my head is it's not pounding, but everything feels hazy from getting really into this story. My god. take this time to drink some more water. Awesome, thanks. Normally I don't do that, but I felt like this was a really, like, big part of the story, so I wanted to make sure you heard it. Let's see, where was I? Slowly, he pushed the accelerator to drive the shuttle towards the exit in the ceiling. Through the windshield, he could see Phil, Techno, and Puffy still frozen, but this time he did his best not to look at Phil's face as they drove past him. His throat ached something fierce. His head was pounding. He used one hand to wipe the tear off his cheek. At some point, Tommy had grabbed his hand again. With a quick squeeze of his fingers, Wilbur was yanked back down into his body and squeezed back as hard as he could. Let's go. Hold on. My cat just woke up, and I feel like he might want to leave the room, so gonna let him out real quick. Hi, baby. Hello. There you go, Bubs. Alright. When did I knock my water bottle over? That's no good. It's right on top of my lights. Anyway. They were both slammed back in their seats as the shuttle flew up the tunnel at breakneck speed. I feel like they're not going to be able to make it out. What if there's like a... What if one of the reasons why the Antarctic Empire is so, like is kind of an impenetrable force is because of, like, a force field or something? Wait, no, but they didn't experience a force field when they came in. Maybe they put up a force field without the princes knowing because of the princes. Hold on, why are ads playing again? Are they? Oh, wait, no. I think that's just my thing. I think that's just my thing saying, like, oh, you don't have any? Okay, I think we're good then. I think that could just be, like, so I have a button on my, stream manager to run 60-second ads, but, it doesn't become an option, anytime pre-rolls or whatever they're called are playing. So I thought that ads were running again, but I don't think they ever stop. Like, I don't think the button ever, like, flashed green again. Whatever. Oh my god. They were both slammed back in their seats as the shuttle flew up the tunnel at breakneck speed. Wilbur glanced at the numbers on the console, wincing when he saw the outside temperature dropping rapidly. Pro streamer, my favorite internet person? What's that supposed to mean? Wait, why are you saying pro? Oh, because I'm unobservant? Yeah, that makes sense. Higher. 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 Light. Wilbur was blinded by a sea of bright white snow as the shuttle left the tunnel behind. He pushed down harder on the accelerator, angling the ship so it was heading straight for the sky. Breaking through the atmosphere was much easier this time without the presence of violent winds threatening to tear the ship apart. Even still, Tommy started screaming, and Wilbur did too as they were pressed so far into their seats they couldn't even move their heads. They climbed and climbed and climbed, and then... stars. The shuttle broke the atmosphere, and they were swallowed by the stars. Wilbur gasped in relief, and Tommy did the same, both slumping forward now that they were no longer flying at a ridiculous speed. Through the window, Wilbur glanced down at the surface of Zephyrus 4. From above the planet, it seemed like nothing more than an endless wasteland of snow and ice. but it was so much more. More than anyone who hadn't been there could ever imagine. Wilbur turned the ship away from the planet, and a small part of him screamed in protest, but he ignored it. Although he didn't have a destination in mind yet, he just knew they had to get away from Zephyr's 4. Even just seeing it through the window of the shuttle was enough to make him white-knuckle the controls, so he forced himself to press down on the accelerator towards the empty void of stars. The cockpit of the shuttle was silent for several long minutes. Zephyr's 4 got smaller and smaller behind them, as his and Tommy's breathing evened out. Wilbur tried not to let himself think about everything that had just happened. He tried not to think about Jack, or Amesy, or Techno, and especially not Phil. But that smile was seared into his mind, and he wasn't sure if he'd ever be able to get it out. More time passed. Soon, they were out of Zephyr's 4's orbit, and found themselves floating aimlessly. A decision now had to be made. Do you know where we're gonna go? Tommy asked, startling Wilbur out of his thoughts. Furrowing his brows, Wilbur pulled up a map on the console screen and tried to see what was nearby. It seemed like Quackity had refueled the shuttle, giving them far more options to choose from compared to what they had when they left Eldingvegger. You know, we might be able to swing a Blazophane deal with Mantle, Wilbur murmured, noticing how Schlatt's planet wasn't terribly far away from where they were. But they were pretty reliant on Empire protection, so I don't know. Will? Oh no, what's going on? Hearing the note of fear in Tommy's voice, Wilbur snapped his head up, opening his mouth to ask what was wrong. But then he saw it. System override, the console screen blared. All systems frozen. Then, without Wilbur touching anything, the shuttle began to turn. I knew something like this was gonna happen. There was like a tractor beam or something in like the first thing. Obviously I wasn't thinking a system override, but still. Hold on. Who could have overridden it then? I'm sure this will all be explained in another chapter. I say another chapter because there's no way in hell this gets explained now. Look at how much is left. Wilbur grabbed the wheel, trying to turn it the other way, but it was impossible to move. As the shuttle turned, a new ship came into view. Or rather, it wasn't a new ship, but one that was familiar for all the wrong reasons. White metal, an intricate crest carved in the front. Oh shit, wait. No, wait, no, wait, no, wait, no, wait, no, wait, no, 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 no! An Eldingvegger ship. Not a small escape shuttle like what they were in, but the royal ship he and Tommy had ridden in as children for diplomatic conferences. Suddenly, a voice cracked through the radio. Shuttle 7, this is Commander Sapnap, General of the Asempi Army. We have overridden your systems and you are going to be brought into our hangar for immediate arrest. Do not resist or force will be used. Do you understand? The shuttle was already driving towards the open hangar of the royal ship on its own. Even if they put on spacesuits and jumped out of the fucking airlock, they would be picked up immediately by the royal ship. They'd been waiting. This whole fucking time, Asempi had just been lying in wait to see if Wilbur and Tommy left Zephyr's 4. A million emotions flooded through him at once, but before Wilbur could process any of it, he found himself leaning forward and tapping the button to turn on the mic. General Sapnap, is it? The shuttle moved into the royal ship's hangar, and Wilbur's chest seized as the door shut behind them. Yeah, that's me. There was a loud roaring sound as the hangar was repressurized, and Wilbur knew they only had seconds before soldiers flooded inside the shuttle. You're a fucking cunt. Behind him, he felt Tommy's arms wrap around him in a hug, as staticky laughter echoed out from the mic. Wilbur leaned back, squeezing his eyes shut as Tommy buried his face in his hair. Well, Prince Orpheus, just wait till you meet the Emperor. Come on, Phil and Techno, come to the rescue, please! I knew it was gonna end in a cliffhanger somehow, but not like this. I wanted them to be dragged back into Zephys 4, and then they have a very awkward very awkward argument about this, but they make up, and then I just want them to be a family. I am not okay right now. Jesus Christ. And there's no other updates. Not yet. Well, Streambees isn't live anymore. Oh, wow. Hold on. I know who you can raid. It's supposed to be hurt/comfort, not hurt/hurt. You're so right for that. Okay. I'm going to be clawing the walls until we get the next update. But until then, I think that's going to be my stream. Let's raid someone. Okay. Let me... There we go. Wait, someone was singing 2004. By Anthony Amarim. Alright. Next stream is probably gonna be something Minecraft or something. I don't know what. But, I haven't heard that song in so long. It's so true. I don't know when it will be. It'll definitely be before I go back up to college. But, yeah. We're gonna be raiding Awesome Sans. They're streaming Minecraft, non-stop streaming till I hit 400 followers. That's gonna be interesting. Alright. Happy New Year, guys. I hope this year's a good one.